The metal keyring dangled from the polished, manicured fingers of Vance Sterling. 3 keys, 1 worn black plastic fob. The harsh fluorescent lights of the finance office reflected off his heavy gold Hublot watch. Silence. Vance turned his wrist, letting the keys drop. They hit the bottom of the aluminum trash can with a sharp clang. Vance leaned back in his heavy leather chair, adjusting the lapels of his $3,000 suit before crossing his arms tightly. "The price is the price, old man," Vance said. His voice was flat, cold. "Walk home or sign the paper." Across the wide mahogany desk sat 68-year-old Arthur Pendleton. He wore a frayed brown tweed jacket with thin elbows and scuffed leather loafers that hadn't seen polish in a decade. Arthur didn't blink. He looked at the trash can holding his keys, then back to Vance. He didn't shout or demand his property back. He simply folded his hands in his lap. What Vance's toxic arrogance blinded him to was the absolute reality of the man sitting across from him. Vance saw only a broke pensioner, an easy target to bleed dry for an end-of-month quota. He had no idea Arthur Pendleton was chairman of the board for Hayes Sterling Trust. He had no idea this old man controlled the $40 million commercial debt line, keeping Apex Motors alive. He had no idea he was extorting the man who literally owned the floor beneath him. 12 hours earlier. The 68th floor of the Hayes Sterling Trust Tower. The environment was the exact opposite of a loud car dealership. No shouting, flashing lights, or ringing bells. Only the quiet, heavy atmosphere of institutional wealth. Arthur Pendleton sat behind a massive desk carved from reclaimed walnut, holding a silver fountain pen as he reviewed the commercial lending portfolio. He hadn't built the bank into a regional powerhouse by delegating everything. He understood exactly where the money was at all times. Turning the heavy pages of the quarterly audit, he stopped on the file for Apex Motors. A high-volume dealership, Apex Motors moved hundreds of units a month, relying heavily on floor plan financing. Arthur stared at the printed numbers. Floor plan financing was simple. Dealerships don't use their own cash to buy inventory. The bank buys the vehicles from the manufacturer and holds the titles, while the dealership pays monthly interest. When a customer buys a car, the dealership must send the principal balance back to the bank within 48 hours. This payment is called a curtailment. Arthur tapped his silver pen against the paper. The numbers didn't align. The automated system had flagged a severe discrepancy in the VIN logs. The auditors tracked 13 high-end luxury trucks. The dealership's monthly report listed them as unsold inventory safely on the lot. But the state registry showed those exact VIN numbers had been registered to new owners 3 weeks ago. Apex Motors was selling the cars, collecting the money, and hiding the sales from the bank. They were keeping the bank's money to float their operations. In automotive finance, this massive violation was called selling out of trust. The exposure was immense, $40 million. Arthur looked at the signature on the submitted financial statement. Vance Sterling, General Manager. Normally, Arthur would dispatch forensic accountants to freeze the accounts and demand an immediate physical inventory check. But Vance had just submitted an application requesting a $5 million credit line increase. The sheer audacity bothered him. Arthur closed the heavy leather binder and set his pen down. He decided to look at his collateral himself to see exactly how Vance operated his floor. Arthur stood and crossed the expansive office to his private wardrobe. Bypassing bespoke Italian suits and polished Oxfords, he reached into the back of the closet, and pulled out an old tweed jacket. It was a faded relic from 40 years ago, back when he taught macroeconomics. He slipped into a pair of worn-out loafers. He didn't call his driver or take the executive town car. Taking the private elevator to the sub-basement, he walked past armored corporate vehicles to his personal car. A 1992 Volvo sedan, faded gray, boxy, and indestructible. Arthur slid into the worn fabric seat and turned the ignition. The engine idled with a steady, reliable hum. The drive to Apex Motors took 45 minutes. The late morning sun beat down as Arthur pulled onto the sprawling lot. The contrast was stark. Acres of gleaming, perfectly aligned new vehicles glaring blindly with fresh wax and polished chrome. Arthur parked his faded Volvo in customer parking, turned off the engine, and stepped into the oppressive heat. Smelling hot asphalt and new tire rubber, he adjusted his frayed lapels and walked slowly toward the showroom's massive glass facade. He pulled open the heavy door, met instantly by a freezing blast of air conditioning. The environment inside was calculated and predatory. Pristine white tile floors mirrored the bright lights, while upbeat pop music played from hidden speakers to keep heart rates elevated. Salesmen in cheap suits clustered near the windows, holding plastic clipboards and watching the lot like hawks. It was the final Saturday of the month. In the car business, the end of the month is a pressure cooker. Quotas must be met, and manufacturer bonuses are on the line. The desperation was thick enough to cut. At the dead center of the massive showroom sat the sales tower, an elevated desk looking down on the floor. Behind it stood Vance Sterling, looking exactly like a man drowning in debt while pretending to swim in cash. His navy suit was too tight, his hair slicked back with heavy pomade. He was leaning over the counter, tearing apart a junior salesman. "I do not care what his credit score is," Vance snapped. His voice carried across the quiet showroom. He tapped a thick, manicured finger repeatedly on a printed spreadsheet. "You bury the negative equity in the back end. You bump the interest rate. You sell the extended warranty. You do not let a living, breathing buyer walk off this floor without paper being signed. Do you understand the KPI we need to hit today?" The pale salesman nodded, slumping his shoulders, and walked away rapidly. Vance let out a sharp breath, shooting his cuffs to make sure his heavy gold watch caught the fluorescent lights. He hated the final weekend of the month. He carried massive hidden personal debts from gambling and an unaffordable mortgage. With bank audits looming, he had been floating cash for months, holding back the curtailment payments from Hayes Sterling Trust to cover operational losses and his own exorbitant draw. He was playing a highly dangerous shell game with $40 million of the bank's money. He needed cash deals and high-margin finance contracts today to cover the missing funds before auditors arrived on Monday. Arthur didn't approach the desk. He stood quietly by a fully loaded luxury SUV in the center of the pristine floor, hands behind his back, reading the Monroney sticker on the window. He noted the manufacturer's base price, then the secondary dealership add-ons. $4,000 for localized market adjustment, $800 for nitrogen-filled tires, and $500 for mandatory VIN etching. Predatory markups designed to extract maximum capital from uneducated buyers. As he read, 3 different salesmen assessed him from across the floor. They noted his gray hair, unhurried posture, severely frayed elbows, and scuffed loafers. One glanced out the glass doors, spotting the faded Volvo. They made their calculations in seconds and turned their backs. No money, a credit criminal. A massive waste of time. In dealership terminology, Arthur was a stroke. Someone who just wanted to look and could never actually secure financing. Arthur stood there for 12 full minutes, completely ignored. He cataloged this in his mind, a failure in basic customer service and floor management. From the tower, Vance watched the old man. Checking the main sales board, Vance saw he was exactly 2 units short of hitting a manufacturer volume bonus that would pay out $50,000. Cash he desperately needed to cover his missing floor plan funds. He looked back at the old man in the cheap jacket. Desperate times required desperate measures. Stepping down from the platform, Vance smoothed his tie and plastered on a wide, predatory smile. His walk across the showroom was aggressive, his expensive shoes squeaking slightly on the tile. Arthur heard the heavy footsteps approaching, but didn't turn away from the window sticker. "Beautiful machine, isn't she?" Vance said. His voice was loud, booming, projecting false warmth. Arthur turned slowly to face him. "It has 4 wheels and an engine." Vance let out a practiced, booming laugh. The amusement did not reach his cold eyes. "Vance Sterling, General Manager of Apex Motors. I like a man who gets straight to the point." Vance extended his hand. Arthur looked at the thick gold college ring and manicured cuticles before reaching out. The handshake was brief. "Arthur." "Well, Arthur," Vance said. He stepped uncomfortably close, invading the physical space to establish immediate dominance. "You look like a man who knows the exact value of a dollar. I saw what you pulled up in. Old Reliable sitting out there. But let us be completely honest with each other. It is time for a serious upgrade." Arthur kept his face perfectly neutral. "I need reliable transportation." "You came to the exact right place," Vance said. His eyes were already flicking toward the glass walls of the finance office, known as the box. "I am going to make you a deal today that you absolutely cannot refuse. Let us get your keys. Let my service guys take a quick look at your trade, and we will get you into the 21st century." Silence. Arthur pulled the worn black fob from his pocket. The trap was officially set. The glass doors slid open, swapping artificial chill for the suffocating heat of the asphalt lot. Vance walked a half-step ahead, moving with the predatory swagger of a man who measured his self-worth in commission checks. Adjusting his heavy gold watch, he made a calculated display to remind the customer of the wealth disparity between them. Arthur followed, his scuffed loafers dragging slightly. Shoulders slumped, he played the tired pensioner to perfection. But he wasn't looking at the shiny new inventory. He was looking at collateral. Hayes Sterling Trust provided $40 million in floor plan financing to this dealership. Every vehicle on this blistering blacktop technically belonged to Arthur's ledger. Vance only saw an elderly target carrying the scent of easy money. "Let us see what we are working with here, Arda," Vance said. He did not bother to ask for permission to use a nickname. He clapped his manicured hands together. The sound was sharp, hollow across the open lot. "You said it was a classic, or, as we call it in the car business, a massive liability." Arthur pointed a weathered finger toward the far end of the lot. There it sat, a 1992 Volvo sedan, painted the color of deep ocean water. It wasn't merely clean, it was immaculate. The chrome trim gleamed, panel gaps were perfect, and tires held deep tread. Having spent 30 years in a climate-controlled garage, its liquid value in the enthusiast market rested firmly at $8,000. Vance stopped. Blinking behind his sunglasses, his mask slipped for a fraction of a second. He knew exactly what he was looking at. A pristine brick of Swedish steel he could flip to a collector for an unrecorded cash premium. Then the mask snapped back. He replaced his flash of greed with a grimace of profound pity. Circling the car, Vance kicked the front driver's side tire, producing a dull, solid thud. "Yeah, I see it," Vance muttered, shaking his head slowly. He ran a flat hand along the perfect roofline, pretending to find a non-existent rough patch in the finish. "Clear coat is fighting for its life right here. Structural integrity on these old frames, Artie. It goes quick once the rust starts hiding in the wheel wells." There was no rust. It was simply the opening move in a game of psychological attrition. Vance leaned over the hood, peering intensely through the windshield, and the VIN plate looks a little faded. That is a massive red flag for our wholesale buyers. Tells them the car has been baking in the sun for a decade. Arthur watched the performance without defending the car or mentioning the thick stack of service records in the glove box. He simply cataloged the tactics. This was the man trusted with $40 million of Hayes sterling capital. A man lying about oxidized paint to intimidate a senior citizen. "Open it up," Vance commanded. He held out his open palm. He did not ask for the keys. He demanded them with his body language. Arthur reached into the deep pocket of his tweed jacket, his fingers tracing his single car key on its worn leather fob. This key was his exit strategy. In the automotive business, the customer's keys are their only anchor to the outside world. Once the dealership controls the keys, they control the mobility, the timeline, and the escape route. Arthur placed the key into Vance's waiting hand. Vance's fingers snapped shut around it like a steel trap. He unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled of conditioned leather and old paper, a flawless time capsule with uncracked dash and crystal-clear analog dials. Vance twisted the key. The engine turned over instantly, settling into a smooth, quiet idle. No knocking or ticking, just the steady hum of a perfectly tuned machine. Vance gripped the steering wheel and pressed the accelerator, revving the engine unnecessarily hard. The tachometer needle spiked dangerously. The engine roared in protest against the abusive input. Arthur's jaw tightened a fraction of a millimeter. The only physical reaction he allowed himself. "Hear that?" Vance yelled over the engine noise, though there was absolutely nothing wrong to hear. That hesitation. The fuel injectors are begging for mercy. The transmission mounts are probably sawdust by now. Vance killed the engine and pulled the key. Instead of handing it back, he dropped it deep into his tailored trouser pocket. The hostage had been taken. Stepping out, Vance slammed the heavy door with excessive force. He leaned against the Volvo's roof, crossed his arms, and looked down at Arthur. Silence. 5 seconds passed. 10 seconds. Vance used the heavy silence to build anxiety. A classic high-pressure tactic to make the customer feel the crushing weight of their inadequate vehicle while waiting in suspense for the financial verdict. Arthur simply looked back, his expression mild, breathing perfectly steady. "Look, Artie," Vance finally said. He dropped his voice an octave to simulate deep sympathy. "I am going to shoot straight with you, because I respect my elders. Most lots would not even take this thing on trade. It is a massive liability. It is lot rot waiting to happen. The wholesale auction house will laugh me off the block." Vance sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck as if taking on a massive personal burden. "But I see you need a new ride. You need something safe, something reliable for your age. I am going to do you a personal favor. I will give you $500 for it." $500. For a vehicle with a liquid value of $8,000. It was a calculated insult, designed to break the customer's spirit and establish absolute power. Vance was framing his pennies as financial salvation. Arthur looked from his immaculate hood to Vance's pristine suit, calculating the desperation required for a margin theft this aggressive. The dealership must be bleeding cash. The floor plan financing and curtailment payments must be dangerously overdue. 500, Arthur said. His voice was soft, gravelly. 500, Vance confirmed, nodding slowly. And honestly, my regional manager is going to absolutely chew me out for giving you that much. But I want to help you out, Artie. I really do. We will apply that $500 toward the down payment on that silver sedan we looked at inside. It gets you out of this Swedish death trap and into a modern vehicle. That is quite an appraisal. Arthur's tone remained perfectly neutral. It is reality, my friend. Welcome to the modern car market. Vance didn't wait for Arthur to accept or decline. In his mind, the trade-in negotiation was over. He whistled sharply across the sun-baked lot. A young, exhausted porter in a sweat-stained Apex Motors polo jogged over from the wash bay. "Yeah, boss?" the porter asked. He glanced nervously between Vance and Arthur. Vance tossed the Volvo key. The young man caught it clumsily against his chest. "Take this junker around to the back lot," Vance ordered. His voice was loud, highly authoritative, making sure Arthur heard every single syllable. "Park it behind the dumpsters by the service entrance. Do not block the wholesale transport trucks. We are going to need to scrap this one out by the end of the week." The porter looked at the pristine Volvo. He looked confused. "The back lot? Behind the dumpsters? Boss, this thing is mint." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Did I ask for a mechanical evaluation, or did I tell you to move the car?" The porter swallowed hard. He looked down at his shoes. "Moving it now, boss." Arthur watched quietly as the young man drove the deep blue Volvo away, turning the corner around the showroom until it disappeared entirely from view. Arthur's only method of transportation was gone, his property confiscated without consent. A blatant violation of federal dealership regulations and a predatory practice outlawed in 3 states. The very definition of holding the trade hostage. If a customer wanted to leave now, the dealer would stall, claiming the keys were lost or out on a test drive. The psychological friction of fighting a hostile staff was often enough to keep an exhausted customer sitting at the desk until they signed the paperwork out of sheer fatigue. Vance turned back with a wide, predatory grin of perfectly bleached teeth. "All right, Artie. The hard part is over," Vance said. He placed a heavy, patronizing hand on Arthur's tweed-covered shoulder. "Let us get out of this heat. Let us go inside and run the numbers. I have a spot all ready for us." Arthur didn't shrug the hand off, letting Vance guide him forward while memorizing the aggressive pressure of the grip. "Lead the way," Arthur said quietly. Vance steered Arthur through the heavy glass doors into the building's artificial chill. They bypassed the open, well-lit showroom desks and the comfortable waiting area with its plush leather chairs. Instead, Vance led Arthur down a narrow, windowless hallway, smelling of cheap cologne and laser printer ozone, stopping at the last door on the left. The brushed metal plaque read F&I Manager, Finance and Insurance. In the automotive industry, it was known simply as the box. Vance pushed the door open and gestured inside. "Have a seat, Artie. Let us build your new future." The walk to this office felt like a guided descent into a pressure cooker. The room was deeply claustrophobic, designed specifically to isolate and disorient. The sterile white walls closed in immediately. No windows, no clocks, just an oversized polished mahogany desk dominating the limited space, positioning the customer cramped against the heavy oak door. The air conditioner rattled aggressively, blasting frigid air to keep the buyer shivering and eager to sign just to escape the cold. Vance settled into his high-backed leather executive chair, elevating his posture inches above his guest. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and let his arm drop, his heavy gold hublot watch clunking loudly against the glass desktop. A calculated auditory signature of wealth and authority meant to intimidate. Arthur took the opposing seat. The cheap, armless vinyl guest chair sat entirely too low, forcing him to lean his elbows on the desk, just to maintain a conversational distance and physically look up at Vance. Arthur rested his weathered hands on his lap, breathing slowly, tracking every micro-action. Vance pulled a blank sheet of paper from the center drawer. He clicked the cap off his solid gold Mont Blanc fountain pen. With practiced, aggressive strokes, Vance drew a heavy vertical line down the center of the page, then a horizontal line across the middle. 4 empty squares. The 4 square. The most notorious tool of psychological manipulation in retail automotive, a shell game designed to confuse the brain and obscure the true cost. To the untrained eye of a desperate buyer, it was just scrap paper. To Arthur Pendleton, sitting chairman of Hayes Sterling Trust, it was a weapon of mass financial destruction. The top left square represented the trade-in value. Top right, the purchase price. Bottom left, cash down payment. Bottom right, monthly payment. A mechanism to move money around the board so fast the buyer never realized they were bleeding dry. If a customer fought for a higher trade-in, the dealer simply bumped the purchase price. If they demanded a lower monthly payment, the dealer stretched the loan term, burying the buyer in negative equity. The box was designed to ensure the customer lost track of the total cost, while laying the groundwork for a yo-yo scam if the buyer later tried to unwind the deal. The trap was fully set, the trade-in hidden, the keys stolen, the victim isolated. Vance believed he was the absolute apex predator in this windowless room. He had no idea the quiet man in the frayed tweed jacket was simply waiting for the ink to dry on the evidence. Silence. Vance smiled, tapping the gold pen against the paper. "All right, Arthur," Vance said, dropping his voice into the soothing tone of a seasoned predator. "Let us figure out how to get you driving your new sedan today. We want to make this painless." The gold pen scratched against the paper, filling the top right box. $38,500. The manufacturer's suggested retail price. Without breaking eye contact, Vance added a column of smaller numbers down the right-hand margin. "Now, we have a few standard dealership protections applied to all our inventory," Vance said smoothly. "We go ahead and install a specialized VIN etching on all the glass panels. It deters theft, drops your insurance premiums significantly. We also replace the standard atmospheric air in your tires with pure nitrogen. It keeps the tire pressure completely stable regardless of the weather. Gives you much better fuel economy over the life of the vehicle." Arthur watched the dark ink flow. $899 for the VIN etching. A chemical stencil costing $12 in materials and 3 minutes of a porter's time. $199 for the nitrogen tire fill. Literal air. $2,999 for a mandatory ceramic coating that was just a wash bay teenagers spraying cheap wax over the hood. Vance seamlessly tacked on $4,097 in pure markup before the negotiation even started. Arthur's face remained entirely neutral. Are those additions optional? The lie came effortlessly, polished by years of repetition. "They are pre-installed at the distribution hub, Arthur. It is strict dealership policy. I could not take them off this invoice even if I wanted to. A textbook violation of state deceptive trade practices. The law explicitly stated hard add-ons could not be forced as a condition of financing. Arthur cataloged the violation in his mental dossier. He simply offered a deliberate nod. "I understand," Arthur said softly. Vance's posture expanded, mistaking Arthur's quiet observation for submission. The old man in the frayed tweed jacket was rolling over. This would be the easiest, most profitable fleece of the month. Vance moved his pen to the bottom left square, the down payment box. "Now, with your trade-in valued at $500, we are going to need a little more cash up front to make the bank algorithms happy," Vance said, tapping the bottom left square twice. "Let us run your credit profile and see exactly what we are working with." Vance turned toward his dual monitors, angled sharply away from Arthur's line of sight. "Social Security number?" Vance asked, his eyes locked on the glowing screen. Arthur recited the 9 digits. His steady voice betrayed zero anxiety. Vance's fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, clattering loudly in the tight space. He hit enter. Silence settled over the room as the software communicated with the major credit bureaus. The corner laser printer hummed to life, spitting out a single page. Vance snatched it without looking and scanned the top line. For a fraction of a second, Vance's hand froze. His jaw locked, breath catching slightly. Printed at the top of the Equifax report was a number that made absolutely 0 sense, given the man sitting across the desk. 820. A perfect Tier 1 credit score. Vance scanned the supporting data. Arthur Pendleton carried 0 revolving debt. He had a spotless mortgage history spanning 4 decades, a practically non-existent debt-to-income ratio, and no collections, bankruptcies, or liens. In automotive finance, an 820 was a golden ticket, qualifying the buyer for the absolute lowest promotional interest rates with 0 risk to the lender. Vance slowly lowered the paper and looked at Arthur. He took in the frayed tweed jacket, the scuffed loafers, and the old man's passive expression. A new calculation formed in Vance's mind. The old man was a financial ghost. Despite his prime credit profile, he clearly did not understand his own leverage. He looked like a retired teacher on a fixed pension and had not fought the insulting $500 trade-in offer on his mint Volvo, nor the $4,000 in fake fees. Vance made a deliberate choice rooted in pure greed. Instead of submitting this pristine application to the captive manufacturer lender for a 3% rate, he would submit it to a subprime partner bank. He would write the contract at an artificially inflated rate, letting the dealership pocket the massive difference in a reserve payout. Marking up the rate was highly regulated, often illegal when discriminatory, but incredibly lucrative for the finance manager's commission check. Vance flipped the report face down. He let out a heavy theatrical sigh designed to project bad news. "Arthur," Vance started, leaning his elbows heavily onto the glass desk. He laced his fingers together, forming a steeple under his chin. "I am going to shoot extremely straight with you. The banks are tight right now. Very, very tight." Arthur maintained his forward posture, his hands still in his lap. "Oh. You have decent payment history," Vance lied smoothly, the deception sliding off his tongue without a second thought. "But you are on a fixed pension income. The banking algorithms do not like that. They see a fixed income. They see immediate risk. They see a 68-year-old man. They see a limited earning window." Silence. The air conditioner rattled. The tick of Vance's gold watch echoed off the stark walls. "I had to pull some major strings for you today," Vance continued, shaking his head slowly. I had to call a senior buyer over at the bank directly. I had to call in a massive personal favor just to get them to look at this file and give us an approval. Vance brought his pen back to the 4-square paper, moving to the bottom right monthly payment box. He scribbled a massive number, $842 a month. Next to it, the term length, 72 months. Finally, pressing down hard, he wrote the interest rate, 19.9%. Vance slid the paper across the blotter, tapping the bottom right square twice with his pen. Arthur stared down. He did not touch the pen or reach for his reading glasses. He simply looked at the ink. 19.9% on a flawless Tier 1 profile. Inside Arthur's mind, a vault of financial regulations opened. This wasn't just a bad car deal. It was a criminal violation of the Truth in Lending Act and a brazen breach of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. He was observing predatory lending practices, carrying massive federal prison sentences and business-ending fines. But more significantly, Arthur saw the systemic risk to his own money. Hayes Sterling Trust provided the $40 million floor plan financing, keeping Apex Motors alive. Every vehicle outside belonged to Arthur's bank, which extended the credit line based on strict operating covenants. Those covenants required adherence to federal guidelines and explicitly forbade fraudulent contracting and yo-yo financing schemes. If Vance was willing to do this to a supposedly broke pensioner, he was doing it to everyone. Single mothers, veterans, college students. Vance was padding his commission with predatory paper, using Hayes Sterling Trust to facilitate massive fraud. The institutional risk was astronomical. If the CFPB or FBI audited this dealership, federal fines would hit tens of millions, and the collateral securing the credit line would be frozen in court. This claustrophobic little office, the box, was a ticking time bomb of liability for Arthur's banking institution. Arthur traced the cold edge of the mahogany desk. He looked at the 19.9%, the $4,000 in fake fees, and the $500 stolen trade-in. He filed the numbers into memory. The audit was complete. The evidence was irrefutable. Arthur sat completely silent, watching the arrogant man wait for a signature that would never come. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The F&I office was intentionally uncomfortable. No windows, bolted chairs, and a locked thermostat, pumping the temperature to a sweat-inducing 76 degrees. Vance tapped his gold pen, his Hublot watch catching the harsh glare. He radiated the frantic energy of a man desperate to hit a quota. Arthur did not sweat. He sat perfectly still, jacket elbows resting on the desk. Between them lay the 4-square contract, a maze of inflated numbers on cheap stock. Arthur recognized the template instantly. His bank's compliance team had designed its baseline structure, but the dealership had butchered it, layering unauthorized add-ons like parasitic vines. Arthur traced a liver-spotted finger down the third column, moving past the $300 nitrogen tire fee and the $900 V1N etching charge. His finger stopped at the adjusted capitalized cost. "This line," Arthur said. Vance leaned forward. The thick leather of his executive chair groaned under the abrupt shift in weight. "What about it, Pops? That is your monthly financial commitment. Sign the bottom line, and you drive out of here tonight." Arthur kept his finger pinned. The base price is $26,000. The fees add $4,000. That makes $30,000. "Basic addition," Vance said. He checked his watch again, a sharp, dismissive gesture. "Glad we are finally on the same page. Pick up the pen." "The amortization schedule below it," Arthur said. his voice entirely flat. "It calculates the starting principal at $34,000. Vance stopped tapping. The pen hovered above the desk. $4,000 materialized out of thin air, Arthur said. "Where is it?" Vance let out an exhausted sigh. He pinched the bridge of his nose before reaching across the desk to tap a block of microscopic print at the bottom of the page. "Market adjustment," Vance said. "We discussed this on the floor. Supply chain issues, microchip shortages, global shipping delays. It is the cost of doing business in the modern world." "It is not itemized," Arthur said. "It is factored into the gross capital," Vance countered, his voice rising a half-octave in defensive irritation. "Look, we do not have time for an accounting seminar. The banks close their automated underwriting systems in exactly 20 minutes. You want the vehicle or not. The math constitutes bank fraud." The word fraud hit the room like a dropped anvil. Vance stared. The mask of the friendly manager vanished, jaw muscles locked, veins bulging against his starched collar. Vance slammed his palms flat onto the desk, making the monitor wobble. "Listen to me very carefully." Vance leaned over the desk, invading the space between them. His breath smelled of stale black coffee and sharp peppermint gum. "You walked in here with a beat-up 1992 Volvo that leaks dirty oil all over my pristine lot. You have dirt on your scuffed shoes. Your jacket is literally falling apart at the seams. I am doing you a massive favor by even letting you sit in that chair and consume my oxygen." Arthur didn't blink. He looked at Vance's white knuckles pressing into the wood. "Nobody else is going to finance a guy like you." Vance spat the words out, aiming for maximum psychological damage. "Nobody. You are a ghost in the system. You are a walking financial liability. I am the only lifeline you have left in this city, and you have the nerve to sit here and argue about the math. Sign the paper, or walk." Arthur looked down at the contract one final time, memorizing the figures. 19% interest, $8,000 in hidden markups, a textbook truth in Lending Act violation, and a documented breach of the curtailment agreements his bank had explicitly drafted for this dealership. Arthur slowly folded his hands in his lap. "I will walk," Arthur said. Vance blinked. This did not align with his script. Customers locked inside. The box were supposed to break under the claustrophobia and high-pressure tactics. They were supposed to fold. "Excuse me," Vance said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The deal is declined," Arthur said. "Return my keys." Vance let out a sharp laugh. He stood abruptly, pacing the tight space behind his desk, before yanking his silk tie tighter against his throat. "You think you can just waste 3 hours of my time and walk out the front door?" Vance asked. "Yes." "It does not work like that, old man." Arthur stood. His movements were slow and devoid of fear. He smoothed his jacket and looked Vance in the eyes. "My keys now." Vance stopped pacing. Leaning against the desk and crossing his arms, a smug grin spread across his face. "We have a slight logistical problem regarding your keys," Vance said. Arthur waited. "Your Volvo." Vance waved a hand vaguely toward the solid wall separating them from the back of the building. "Was deemed an environmental hazard. Our intake team already processed it. It has been moved off-site. Bring it back." "Cannot do that," Vance said, his grin widening to show bright white veneers. "The surrender paperwork is already filed with the state database. It is scheduled for the scrapyard, set to be crushed into a metal cube first thing tomorrow. As far as the Department of Motor Vehicles is concerned, that car no longer exists." It was a blatant lie. A classic psychological tactic used to hold the trade-in hostage. The lot porter had likely parked the Volvo behind the wash bay and dropped the keys into Vance's desk. The goal was to remove the customer's escape route, trapping them until they signed the profitable contract. Arthur knew the tactic intimately from consumer protection reports that crossed his own desk. Reading about it was one thing. Experiencing its aggressive reality was another. "You stole my property," Arthur said. "I expedited a retail transaction," Vance corrected smoothly. "You handed us the keys. You legally consented to a vehicle appraisal. Now you have no car. You have no leverage. You have a very long, very cold walk home in the dark. Unless—" Vance tapped the fraudulent contract again with a single finger. "Unless you sit back down, pick up that pen, and sign." Arthur took a single, measured step toward the door. Vance moved faster. He sidestepped the desk and planted his large frame in front of the frosted glass door, blocking the only exit. The air in the office abruptly felt stripped of oxygen. "Move," Arthur said. His voice remained a flat, calm baseline. "Or what?" Vance challenged. He looked down at the older man, visually measuring the physical difference between them. Vance was 35, built thick from weekend golf outings and heavy steakhouse dinners. Arthur was 68, lean and unassuming. "You going to assault me? You going to hit me? Go ahead, Pops. Give me a reason to defend myself." Arthur kept his hands relaxed, measuring the distance between Vance's shoulder and the door handle. "I will ask one final time," Arthur said. "Return my property." Vance shook his head in mock pity. He pulled a sleek smartphone from his tailored jacket and unlocked it. "You leave me absolutely no choice," Vance said. "We have a strict zero-tolerance policy for hostile vagrants threatening our staff." Vance tapped a speed dial contact, holding the phone high so Arthur could hear it ringing. "Who are you calling?" Arthur asked. "Chief Miller," Vance said, keeping his dark eyes locked intensely on Arthur. "Head of the local police precinct. Good personal friend of mine. We golf on Sundays at the country club. I finance every single one of his patrol cruisers. He is going to be very, very interested to hear about the aggressive trespasser currently refusing to leave my private office." The phone line clicked open. A heavy, gruff voice echoed faintly. "Miller here. What do you need, Vance?" Vance didn't break eye contact. His smile was razor-thin. "Hey, Chief," Vance said, his tone instantly shifting to a relaxed, casual drawl. "Sorry to bother you this late on a weeknight. I have a volatile situation down at the dealership. An older gentleman, vagrant type. He is causing a major public disturbance right here in my finance office, refusing to leave the private premises, becoming physically aggressive with my staff." Arthur remained still, listening to the fabricated charges pile up. "Yeah, he is standing right here in front of me," Vance continued, nodding mockingly at Arthur. "I asked him nicely to vacate the property multiple times. Now I am highly concerned for the physical safety of my employees. I need a patrol car down here right now. SWAT team if you have them available. Just kidding. But seriously, I need him forcibly removed. Heavy handcuffs might be necessary to send a clear message." The gruff voice grunted in acknowledgement. "Give me exactly 5 minutes, Vance. I have a patrol unit sitting 2 blocks away. Keep him contained in the room." "Appreciate it, Chief. I owe you a steak dinner." Vance ended the call and pocketed the phone. He crossed his thick arms, planting his feet to fully barricade the door. 5 minutes, Vance said. "You have exactly 5 minutes to decide how the rest of your pathetic night goes. You sit down and sign the paper, the cops arrive, and I tell them it was all just a big misunderstanding. I will even give you a complimentary ride home in your brand new vehicle. You refuse, and you spend the night shivering in a concrete holding cell. By Monday morning, a municipal judge slaps you with a severe criminal trespass charge. At your advanced age, that kind of stress on the heart. It is a massive medical risk. Silence. Absolute silence fell over the room. The hum of the fluorescent lights vanished. For 10 seconds, neither man moved or spoke. 1, 2, 3. Vance waited eagerly for the panic to set in, for the slumping shoulders, the trembling hands, the desperate apologies that always followed the police threat. It was his undefeated closing technique. Raw fear was a far better motivator than financial logic. 4, 5, 6. Arthur didn't panic. His breathing remained steady. His pale, sharp eyes tracked the room one last time. The cheap chair, the meaningless motivational posters, the fraudulent contract bearing $4,000 in phantom fees and a ruinous 19% interest rate. 7, 8, 9. Arthur wasn't looking at a local dealership manager anymore. He was looking at a systemic failure, a toxic infection spreading within the commercial lending portfolio of the Hayes Sterling Trust. Apex Motors carried a $40 million commercial credit line backed by Arthur's bank, intended strictly to finance legitimate vehicle inventory. It was instead actively funding a criminal enterprise. It funded Vance's custom suit and his expensive golf games with the corrupt police chief. 10. The 10 seconds expired. The room's power dynamic didn't gently shift. It shattered. Arthur let out a slow sigh. It wasn't defeat, but the disappointed exhalation of a man who had hoped to find a single redeeming quality and found only greed. He reached into the inner pocket of his tweed jacket. Vance flinched hard, his carefully constructed bravado violently breaking for a fraction of a second. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Arthur ignored the command, withdrawing a thick, ivory-white envelope sealed with a wax emblem. He didn't hand it over. He simply held it suspended between them. Arthur looked up. The struggling pensioner vanished. His spine straightened into rigid perfection, his pale eyes turning cold and ruthless. "I came here tonight looking for a reason," Arthur said. His voice was no longer flat. It carried the dense, quiet, terrifying weight of absolute authority. "I was looking for a single reason to keep your $40 million credit line open." Vance's mocking smile faltered instantly. His brain struggled to process the specific number, 40 million, the exact confidential limit of their commercial floor plan financing, a figure no retail customer could possibly know. Arthur took a slow step forward. Vance instinctively backed up, his shoulder bumping hard against the frosted glass door. "You just gave me 5 reasons to close it," Arthur said. The glass door sealed them inside a vacuum. The air conditioning hummed above. Vance stared. A smirk pulled at his jawline, and he let out a short, sharp laugh that slapped against the acoustic panels. "Close my credit line." Vance leaned back in his high-backed leather executive chair. The chair springs groaned under his shifting weight. "You?" Silence. Arthur didn't blink or shift his posture. His hands rested lightly on his lap. "Do you even know where you are, old man?" Vance waved his hand toward the expansive glass wall of the office. Beyond the glass, the showroom floor gleamed under halogen track lighting. Rows of polished steel and leather sat waiting for buyers. "This is Apex Motors. We do $4 million a month in volume. We hold a $40 million floor plan with Hayes Sterling Trust. They need us. You think you can walk in here, in that jacket, and talk to me about my credit line?" Arthur watched the vein pulse softly at Vance's temple and the slight tremor in his fingers as he reached for his ice water. "I know exactly where I am." Arthur's voice remained flat, a desert plain of emotion. Arthur reached down, gripping the worn leather handle of his battered briefcase. He lifted it onto the desk. Vance sighed loudly, rolling his eyes. "Look, if you are getting your checkbook out, the price went up. Nitrogen tires are mandatory. VIN etching is mandatory." Arthur ignored him, his thumb pressing the tarnished brass latch. Click. The sound was sharp. His thumb moved to the right latch. Click. Arthur opened the case. His hand bypassed the empty checkbook and reading glasses, closing around a thick manila folder. He pulled the folder out and laid it flat on the desk. Vance narrowed his eyes. The arrogant smirk faltered further. Arthur flipped the folder open, revealing a stack of heavy ivory cardstock that stood out against the cheap, mass-printed four-square negotiation sheets Vance used to trap customers. Pressing down with his index finger, Arthur slid the top document across the desk. The thick paper whispered over the wood grain. It stopped directly over Vance's gold-plated pen. "Read the header," Arthur said quietly. Vance scoffed, leaning forward to squint at the paper. An embossed navy crest sat at the top, a lion holding a scale. The words Hayes Sterling Trust arched over it. Below, bold, unforgiving letters read, "Notice of default and immediate curtailment." Vance swallowed hard, his pupils dilating as his eyes darted from the logo to Arthur's face. "What is this?" Vance's voice cracked. The smooth, practiced tone of the salesman vanished completely. "Keep reading!" Arthur did not move. Vance looked back down. His eyes scanned the first paragraph. "This document serves as formal notification that Apex Motors is in material breach of the $40 million commercial floor plan agreement. Violations include documented instances of yo-yo financing, fraudulent rate inflation, and withholding customer trade vehicles." Cold sweat broke across Vance's forehead. His hand reached out, fingers hovering over the paper, shaking violently now. His eyes dropped to the signature line. Signed in heavy black ink. Arthur Pendleton. Below the signature, the printed title. Chairman of the Board, Hayes Sterling Trust. Silence. The silence stretched out, filling the room. The air conditioning shut off, leaving a ringing stillness. Vance stared at the name, then looked up at the man in the frayed tweed jacket and scuffed loafers. The man who had quietly watched him lie, cheat, and threaten for 45 minutes. The gold-plated pen slipped from Vance's fingers. It hit the desk with a clack and rolled off, striking the floor with a dull thud. Neither man moved to pick it up. Blood drained from Vance's face, turning his skin a sickly gray. The $3,000 suit suddenly looked like a costume draped over a collapsing frame. He struggled for air. "You," Vance whispered. The word barely carried across the desk. "Me," Arthur replied. Arthur reached into his pocket and withdrew a sleek, matte black smartphone, the only item on him that didn't look 20 years old. He tapped a single button. He raised the phone to his ear. Vance watched, paralyzed. The arrogant general manager was gone, replaced by a terrified animal. He gripped the desk until his knuckles turned white. "Wait," Vance choked out. "Wait, please. We can talk about this. The numbers. I can fix the numbers." Arthur held up one hand, a small gesture carrying absolute authority. Vance snapped his mouth shut. The faint sound of ringing came from the phone's earpiece. One ring. Two. A voice answered, crisp and professional, office of the CEO. "Marcus," Arthur said. "Yes, Mr. Pendleton." The voice on the other end shifted to immediate deference. Hearing the name aloud struck Vance like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair. "Execute the curtailment order on Apex Motors," Arthur commanded. "Immediately, sir," Marcus replied. "The entire credit line?" "Every single dime." Arthur's eyes locked onto Vance. "All 40 million, today." "Understood. Initiating digital lockout now. The recovery teams are standing by on your mark." "Send them in." Arthur lowered the phone and ended the call. He placed the black device face down on the mahogany desk next to the ivory document. "No," Vance breathed. He lunged forward across the desk, his hands grasping at empty air. "You cannot do this. You cannot just shut us down. I have payroll. I have inventory. I will lose everything." Arthur folded his hands in his lap. "You built this business on predatory lending. You used the 4-square box to steal from people who could not defend themselves. You held their property hostage." Arthur nodded toward the trash can where his Volvo keys still sat. "You played a dangerous game. Now the game is over." A sharp electronic chime cut through the room. Vance whipped toward his computer. The screen, previously displaying Arthur's flawless credit score, froze. A loading circle spun briefly. Then the screen flashed bright red. A system error message appeared in stark white lettering. "Terminal locked. Connection to Hayes Sterling Trust terminated. Dealer access revoked." Vance grabbed his mouse, clicking frantically. Clack, clack, clack. He hammered the keyboard, but the screen remained locked, casting an ominous red glow over his sweating face. "No, no, no," Vance muttered, his voice climbing in pitch. Beyond the glass walls, confusion washed over the showroom floor. Arthur turned his head slightly to watch. The lead secretary picked up her phone, only to pull it away in confusion. The phone lines were dead. The bank-financed routing system was cut. A nearby salesman stood up, waving his arms at his frozen monitor while his customers looked on. His screen glowed with the exact same red error message. Terminal locked. Within 60 seconds, every digital system tied to the floor plan financing went dark. Inventory management, credit portals, accounting ledgers. The dealership was digitally paralyzed, its lifeblood severed with a single phone call. Vance stood up, his chair slamming into the wall. He pressed his hands flat against the glass, looking out at his collapsing empire as rising panic echoed across the floor. "My inventory," Vance whispered, his breath fogging the glass. "You cannot take the cars." "The cars belong to the bank," Arthur stated simply. "We are simply collecting our property." A deep, vibrating rumble echoed through the showroom, a low-frequency diesel throb that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly in the chest. Vance turned toward the massive windows facing the highway. Through the afternoon glare, large shapes moved. A heavy-duty flatbed tow truck pulled into Apex Motors. Its yellow cab gleamed, an amber light bar casting rhythmic strobes across the showroom glass. Air brakes hissed as it stopped in the customer lot. Before Vance could process the sight, a second truck turned in. Then a third. A fourth. A convoy of 8 massive recovery vehicles blockaded the exits. Diesel exhaust plumed into the air as the engine's throbbing idle shook the building. Men in high-visibility vests stepped out, moving with military precision. Carrying steel clipboards and master keys, they ignored the frantic salespeople pressed against the showroom glass and marched toward the new vehicles. Heavy steel chains clinked across the blacktop. Vance watched in horror as a recovery agent approached a $90,000 luxury SUV. The agent checked the VIN against his clipboard, unlocked the door with a master override, and drove it onto a waiting flatbed. The hydraulic winch whined, pulling the vehicle up as heavy chains locked around the axles, securing the bank's asset. "They are taking them," Vance said. His voice was hollow, empty, a dead man talking. "They are taking all of them." "Every last one," Arthur confirmed. Amber lights bathed Vance's face in shadows and gold. He turned to Arthur. The old man in the tweed jacket remained calm and solid, a monument of quiet destruction. Vance's legs gave out. Collapsing into his chair, he buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking as a pathetic sob tore from his throat. He had tried to crush a pensioner to hit a quota, but summoned an avalanche instead. Arthur stood and smoothed his jacket. He retrieved his smartphone, leaving the ivory notice of default next to Vance's shaking hands. Walking to the trash can, Arthur pulled his keys from under a fast food wrapper, meticulously wiping them with a pristine handkerchief. At the glass door, he paused and turned back. Vance looked up through his fingers, eyes wide with terror, as the relentless mechanical roar of winches and engines dismantled his life in real time. Arthur's expression was neither anger nor triumph, but the sterile look of an auditor closing a ledger. "The price is the price," Arthur said quietly. Arthur pushed the door open and walked out into the flashing lights of the showroom. Silence. Red and blue lights painted the Apex Motors showroom, cutting through the silence and illuminating stale dust. Outside the glass, the chaotic symphony of dismantling a business continued. 8 diesel trucks idled, their deep rumble vibrating the foundation while screeching winches dragged luxury vehicles onto tilted flatbeds. Inside the claustrophobic glass walls of the finance office, known as the box, the air was suffocating. Vance froze in his executive chair, cold sweat pooling at his collar, his $3,000 suit clinging to his skin. His hands, heavy with a gold Hublot watch, trembled against the faux marble desktop. His monitors displayed only stark lock screens. The parent company had severed the connection. The $40 million floor plan financing was gone, liquidated. Vance stared through the glass of the box, watching his inventory vanish. Every repossessed car meant lost commissions and defaulted loans. He swallowed hard, his throat like cracked earth. A police siren pierced the atmosphere, peaking and abruptly dying outside the main doors. A desperate spark of hope ignited in Vance's chest. Chief Miller. His golfing buddy, the man he had called to have the old man arrested for trespassing. Vance pushed himself up from the leather chair. His knees felt weak, joints locked from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "It is over," Vance muttered, his voice a ragged whisper. He looked toward the unassuming elderly man, standing quietly by the doorway. "You went too far. Chief Miller is here. You are going to a concrete cell, old man." Arthur did not move. He maintained the calm, immovable posture of a mountain. His frayed jacket hung loosely, loafers planted firmly on the carpet. He simply watched Vance, with eyes holding the terrifying weight of absolute authority. Silence. The showroom doors slid open with a hiss. Heavy boots stepped onto the polished granite. Police Chief Miller strode in, flanked by 2 officers. His face was a mask of stone. No friendly smile, no casual greeting. Vance stumbled out of the box, waving frantically and forcing a panicked smile. "Miller, thank God," Vance gasped, pointing a shaking finger back toward the finance office. This old guy in the tweed, he is a hacker. He infiltrated our banking portal. He is trying to steal our floor plan line. Arrest him. Get him out of my showroom." Miller stopped 10 feet away, keeping his eyes locked dead center on Vance's chest. Red and blue cruiser lights pulsed rhythmically across the chief's uniform. "Stand down, Vance," the chief said. His voice was flat, devoid of any past camaraderie. Vance blinked, his forced smile faltering. "What? No, Miller, you do not understand. He is trespassing. I want him removed now." "I said stand down," the chief repeated, his tone dropping an octave, taking on the hard edge of official command. The chief reached to his belt. The metallic snap of the leather pouch unfastening echoed sharply in the cavernous room. He drew his handcuffs. The steel links clinked together, a sound that made the blood drain entirely from Vance's face. "Vance Sterling," the chief said, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "I have just received an emergency dispatch from the state financial regulators. They are acting on a direct priority alert from the fraud division of Hayes Sterling Trust." Vance stepped back. His heel caught the edge of a decorative rug. He stumbled, barely keeping his balance. "Wait, Miller. We play golf on Sundays. We sponsor the Little League." "You are under arrest for wire fraud, grand theft auto, and multiple violations of federal lending statutes," the chief continued, reciting the charges with mechanical precision. "Grand theft auto?" Vance shrieked, his voice cracking into a high pitch. He pointed wildly at the empty spots on the floor. "They are stealing my cars. The bank is stealing my cars." The chief stepped forward, closing the distance in 2 long strides. "You confiscated the keys to a 1992 Volvo belonging to the chairman of that bank. You ordered a porter to hide the vehicle and refused to return the property when the owner attempted to leave. That is illegal seizure. That is theft." Vance's jaw dropped. The words failed to compute. He stared past the chief at Arthur, the old man in the scuffed loafers, the chairman. The backup officers grabbed Vance's arms, violently bunching the fabric of his suit as they wrenched his hands behind his back. Cold steel handcuffs bit into his wrists with a ratcheting click. "You have the right to remain silent," the chief began, the Miranda warning rolling off his tongue in a monotone drone. Vance did not remain silent. He thrashed weakly against the officer's grip. "Wait, please. I will give the keys back. I will unwind the deal. I will drop the price. Please, please." Arthur stepped slowly out of the box, his footsteps measured. He walked past the struggling manager, approaching the trash can beside the receptionist desk. Bending down, Arthur retrieved his worn car keys. He pulled out a pristine linen handkerchief, meticulously wiped away the damp coffee grounds, and tucked the soiled linen away. He turned back. Vance was panting and disheveled, his heavy gold watch sliding down his bound wrists. His toxic bravado was entirely eradicated, replaced by naked terror. Arthur looked at him with a neutral expression. "The price is the price," Arthur said softly. Arthur turned his back and walked through the sliding doors into the warm evening air. Diesel repo trucks roared in a mechanical chorus of consequence. He navigated the chaos, passing flatbeds loaded with luxury vehicles. Behind a row of dumpsters, he found his mint-condition 1992 Volvo, exactly where the porter had hidden it. Arthur unlocked the door and slid into the familiar leather seat. The engine turned over immediately, its reliable purr contrasting sharply with the aggressive industrial roar. Arthur shifted into drive and pulled out, leaving the flashing lights and shattered remnants of Apex motors in his rearview mirror. Silence. Vance Sterling's collapse was a long, agonizing dismantling of a life built on deception. The very next morning, the FBI and state auditors descended upon Apex Motors' parent company. Agents swarmed the corporate offices, carrying out hundreds of boxes filled with files and hard drives. Their forensic accounting was ruthless, peeling back layers to expose years of systematic abuse. They found paper trails of yo-yo financing, where vulnerable customers drove cars home only to be called back days later and forced into punishing loans. They found illegal fees stuffed into 4 square boxes. They found nitrogen tire charges, bogus VIN etching contracts, and phantom warranties. The most severe discovery was a deliberate pattern of curtailment fraud. Vance had sold cars without paying the bank back, using the cash to float his extravagant lifestyle and cover operational losses. The legal hammer fell. The bank called in all outstanding debts. Unable to absorb the $40 million loss, the parent company filed for bankruptcy within 72 hours. Hundreds of complicit employees were terminated and permanently blacklisted. Vance's personal world evaporated. The bank seized his assets, padlocked his foreclosed mansion, and repossessed his luxury vehicles. His frozen bank accounts left him entirely destitute. At his trial 8 months later, Vance sat in a brightly lit, sterile courtroom. Gone was the $3,000 suit, replaced by a loose-fitting orange jumpsuit. His face was gaunt, eyes hollowed by sleepless anxiety, the heavy gold watch locked in evidence. The prosecutor presented irrefutable evidence. Arthur Pendleton's signature on the floor plan financing audit was projected for the jury. Testimonies from victimized customers painted a picture of a man with zero empathy. When the gavel struck like a gunshot, Vance Sterling was found guilty on 34 counts of federal wire fraud, extortion, illegal seizure, and predatory lending. The sentence was unyielding: 15 years in a federal penitentiary, without parole. As bailiffs hauled him away, Vance searched the gallery for a shred of sympathy. He found only empty benches and cold stares. While Vance traded his corner office for a concrete cell, the ripple effects reshaped the industry. High above the city, in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of Hayes Sterling Trust, Arthur Pendleton sat at a massive oval table. The frayed tweed jacket and scuffed loafers were gone, replaced by a tailored charcoal gray suit and polished Oxfords. He looked every bit the chairman. Surrounded by his board, Arthur drafted a sweeping mandate to eradicate toxicity in automotive retail. The new covenants applied to every dealership utilizing their credit. The rules were absolute: zero tolerance for yo-yo financing, deceptive foursquare tactics, and hidden fee packing. A highlighted clause addressed trade-in vehicles. Any dealership caught holding keys hostage or restricting a customer's freedom to walk away would face immediate termination of their floor plan, financing within 1 hour of a verified report. Arthur signed with a black fountain pen. As the ink dried on the parchment, it secured a legacy of protection for millions. The era of the predatory box was over. The narrator's voice returns, calm and resonant over the signed document. Power is rarely loud. True authority does not shout from behind a desk or wrap itself in heavy gold watches. Arrogance is a fragile mask for the terrified and empty. Vance Sterling believed he held the leverage because he controlled the keys to an old Volvo, building his kingdom on the assumption that others were small and easily broken. But the world is full of quiet observers, and sometimes the man you push into a corner owns the entire building. Silence.